I wanted to start off and just kind of tell everybody what Archispeak is, because this is kind of one of those two-sided references. Obviously, this is going to be a podcast about architecture. That's something that the three of us are all involved with. But if you look it up on Urban Dictionary, it says large made-up words that architects and designers use to make themselves sound smarter than you being the client or the confused observer of design. It does nothing to inform or enlighten the consumer of architecture and mostly serves to numb them into obedience or self-doubt. And then there's an example conversation that says, I went to Rem Koolhaas's lecture last night. What did he talk about? I have no idea. It was all in Archispeak. Either I'm stupid or the guy is brilliant. And I think the three of us like that word because, number one, we are not brilliant architects. We don't speak Archispeak, and we probably all despise it to some extent. But I think a lot of people have the idea that architects and designers do speak that way, and I've definitely met a few that speak like that.
One or two.
Yeah,
I try to avoid those people. Actually,
we like to keep it real. When I was teaching, I taught for 10 years at Cal Poly Pomona in the architecture department, and the academics really speak like that, and it would drive students crazy because they would walk away just dumbfounded.
Does anybody have a client that actually enjoys hearing you talk like that, or anyone?
I don't know.
No. Most of mine are public schools, and they really just want plain speak.
Plain speak, yeah.
I think plain speak pays the bills best.
Well, yes. Neal, you found an app that on the App Store that will just spit out random Archispeak sentences, right?
I did actually, yes. In fact, it's called Architects, and it's a great little app.
It's pretty fun.
It's a lot of fun. I'll read you an example here. So, architecturally speaking, with sensitive respect for human scale, the environmental impact analysis presents extremely synergistic challenges to the creation of an immortal monument to prosperity.
Say
what was that?
Interesting.
But yeah, that's how it goes, right?
That is how it goes. So we're here to probably dispel that myth. We don't talk like that.
No.
I will include a link to that app in our show notes so that everybody can download it.
So the relevance of the term Archispeak and how it's even despised within the own architectural world. Speaking with some of the interns that we have in our office, some of them work directly with me, and some of them work with other project managers and come to me for like ARE type advice and stuff like that. We were talking about how much we despise the pseudo-intellectual speak that architects try to pass off as, ooh, look at me, the interstitial space is juxtaposed by the blah 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 blah, and we were just talking about how frustrating that is, and so I could imagine what what a client must think when they're listening to someone talk about it. It's just like, wow, you've said a whole bunch of nothing that makes you sound smart, makes me feel stupid, but at the end of the day means absolutely nothing to me.
Right. Juxtapose is a good word.
Oh yes,
that's a telltale sign that Archispeak is happening.
Absolutely, yes. And then you throw in the interstitial and stuff like that, just to kind of spice it up a little more.
Yeah. Or one of my favorites is when people are talking about a layout being curvilinear. And to me, it's like, pick one. It's either curves or it's linear, but just pick one.
Yeah. You mean they're not both?
I guess not. So, what do you guys... I guess what we should probably do for everybody real quick is just kind of talk about where each of us are coming from. So let me, I guess I'll start. I work at a firm in Southern California, and we do mostly public works projects. a lot of them. We're a pretty big firm throughout the state. There's a few different offices and stuff. It's called HMC Architects. But I mostly work on K-12 projects, so a lot of schools, much like I think what Cormac does as well. And I also personally work on some civic projects like community centers and courthouses and things like that. I think I'm the only one here who's not licensed. I'm working on that. This will be the year of getting licensed for me. I'm well on my way. And so that probably will be something that'll come up every once in a while, but I've definitely put it off long enough, and I'm tired of the nagging voice in the back of my head telling me to get it over with. So I'm getting it over with. Other than that, I've got 4 kids here at home, and I think that we'll probably have a lot to say about life-work balance. It's definitely a topic that's kind of on the forefront of all of our minds because we're trying to sneak this recording session in between when kids are home and when they're not. So that'll definitely come up. And other than that, I like to be outside. That's probably my most favorite thing to do. I ride my bike a lot, and I like to go snowboarding and rock climbing and things like that. So I'm definitely into the outdoor adventure and kind of nature conservation side of things. What about you, Neal?
Well, I'm kind of probably a little unique between you guys because unlike you, I don't have a regular job. I have my own firm. Mainly because of the economic downturn. So that's caused a bit of a challenge for me. But it's been an interesting challenge, and we'll probably at some point talk a little bit about those challenges and trying to find a job and things of that nature as well. So let us know what you guys think about topics like that. But I also mainly spent most of my career doing residential work. It's a little different from you, Evan, and I know from Cormac as well. So, for myself personally, I've got a couple of kids at home as well, so that'll be a bit of a challenge and something we'll talk about from time to time. So, but I think part of why we wanted to do this was to kind of dispel some of the beliefs of architects, and we're not all Frank Gehrys and working up on these ivory towers and not the common perception of an architect, I guess. And I think this podcast is really kind of to get it out there with 3 of us that are real architects that do real work and kind of make things happen in the real world. So that's about for me for now. How about you, Cormac?
Well, I am actually the interesting bridge between you two because I'm located on the East Coast in the Metro DC area, working for a firm in Rockville, Maryland, where our primary focus is on K through 12. Do miscellaneous public works jobs as well, like pools and fire stations, such like that. But whereas when I graduated college from Auburn University, I started in the commercial world. Had the bright idea to go solo for a while. Did predominantly residential, and as Neal was saying, the economic downturn kind of hit architecture and the architecture profession pretty hard. I basically closed up shop after a couple years of private practice, and went back to the commercial world, and which brought me, moved me from Florida to the DC area, and have been doing K through 12. I've got a couple of projects that are under construction, a couple in design, and some of the things that we'll talk about are not only the life-work balance that everybody's been discussing, but also kind of even some of the day-to-day rigors of just being an architect, and what goes into our daily grind, and not to explain it that way because it's not really a grind. I mean, it's a labor of love for all of us, and just how we manage the day-to-day operation of things. The the family balance. I've got a wife and 3 kids here in DC, and just why we do what we do and why we love what we love.
Can we say the life of an architect? Although we might be treading on our friend Bob's blog there, so maybe not.
Is that trademark?
I don't know if that's. We'll probably get a call from Bob next.
he's in Texas, so it very well could just be law. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're talking about seceding, so we're not sure how long that rule is going to be in effect.
Oh, okay. Well, one of the things that both of you guys brought up, I just recently gave a presentation at one of the local high schools, and man, was it an ugly high school. They really picked the wrong architect. But I was asked to talk about, it was a career day, and it was about architecture for me. So it was kind of the same thing what you were just saying, Cormac, and I also wove in things about the economy and just kind of realities that architects are dealing with, like what Neal was talking about. And one of the interesting things that came out just last week was that, graduates, number one, architecture is the worst degree you can get right now because of, number two, the unemployment rate for architects just in the state of California. I'm not sure what it's like back where you are, Cormac, but it probably not any better. But it was pegged at 13.9%, which is about 4 or 5% higher than the average in the state of California for all professions. So it's definitely leading the way. And so like you said, Cormac, it really has to be a labor of love, because I think, a lot of people do just have this vision of the high and mighty designers working in the ivory towers, like Neal said. But then, there really isn't much money in architecture, and that is one of the things that I just wanted to talk about with these students, because, the first question you get when you're presenting anything for any career to high school students is, how much money do you make? And that came up, and I gave 2 presentations. It came up in both of them, because you're showing these beautiful works of art. And, that's the other thing I really wanted to talk about, and I think we will on this podcast too, is what's the difference between a building and architecture. But, you get to see these really expensive things, and so I think people just automatically think, well, the people who are making those really expensive things are making a lot of money too. And obviously our margins are pretty razor thin, especially in a bad economy. Our clients are demanding more and more from us, and we are getting less and less out of it just because of the competitive nature. There's so many people going after the same jobs that people are willing to undercut everybody else to do it.
Yeah, and with that said, I mean, the economy itself, the clients are pretty much, they know that they've got us between a rock and a hard place, and so they're expecting us to be very tight with our budgets. They come in, we've had cases where they'll say, okay, here's our budget, we base our fee proposals on that, and then it's the prevailing wages. It conforms to the AIA's typical standards for for the prevailing wages, and they come back and they try to beat us down further and further, and we oblige for the simple fact that we want the job. And I think that right now is kind of what the economy's done to us, is really kind of cut each other's throats, so to speak, so that we can just basically keep the roof over our head and the food in our bellies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because I know that Neal and I both kind of commented on a recent post from our brother Bob, who basically posted that exact comment, and how frustrated he is about everybody always asking about how much architects make, and basically just trying to explain that it's almost like how my wife always explains that she doesn't teach public schools because she wanted to get into it to get rich. She did it because she loved teaching, and she wanted to she loves kids, and that's why she does it. And I think the same can be said for us, because we don't really get into it for the riches. In fact, the very first joke that I was ever told by an architect, which was my boss the day that I graduated, well, the day that I started working after graduation with him was, he was like, what's the quickest way for an architect to make $1 million? Like, I don't know. He goes, start off with $2 million.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was just like, great. I was like, I don't remember my high school guidance counselor telling me that, but in
high school guidance counselors have it all wrong when it comes to architecture.
Yes. And so it's like, how I think one of the things that I want to get out of this podcast is not only just chatting with, commiserating with our fellow architects and design professionals, but also to kind of, as we've all said, dispel the rumor to just the layman, about what architects are, do, get paid, all of that stuff that, we, it's a job, it's a labor of love. And even what, Bob said in his was, if you big money, if you want to make the, doctors and lawyers type salary, well, then go become a doctor and a lawyer. I mean, if you want to make a good living and be an architect, well, it goes back to be competent, be experienced, and just enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, because if you don't, man, you're going to be super miserable, right? I mean, if you have, it's a double whammy if you don't love it. That's for sure.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
I think for those who are unfamiliar with who we're talking about here, we're referencing several times here our brother Bob Borson, who writes the very popular blog Life of an Architect at lifeofanarchitect.com. So if you're curious who we're referring to here, that's who we're talking about. But I think that this is it really is a profession, and it's not really a job. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a job to me. I know there's times maybe where it seems like a job. Probably, Cormac, when you're reviewing your specs, that becomes a job. But overall, I mean, it is sort of, we throw around the term labor of love, but it's really a profession. It's what we chose to do with our lives because we do enjoy it. And if you enjoy what you do, you really don't have a job. It's what you do every day, and sometimes, it is sort of what I do every day. I'm always designing. I'm always, when I'm walking around or outside, always critiquing or looking at design, even things like text and fonts. I think it happened with me at a very early age. I just started noticing things, and it's like, this is what I do. And so in some sense, it's just me, what I do naturally. And I have a feeling that a lot of us are maybe the same, or maybe not. I don't know. Tell us what you think. But I think that many of us get into this profession because it is what we do, and we have a talent for it. And then, of course, we go and then we do get the education. We learn about, the code and how to build buildings safely and waterproof them and do all of those things. But I think just inherently, it's just a part of us that we're designers.
Yeah.
And whether or not you're a designer in a firm you're working for, or you're a student, thinking you're going to design the next Freedom Tower or something as soon as you graduate, and let me tell you now, that's not going to happen. But
Hey!
It is what we do.
Don't hold people down already.
Okay. That could happen, I suppose, but it's unlikely. But it doesn't matter because everything that you do is design. One of the things when I had a team of people working for me that I used to preach to them is, and this may be another topic for another day, but just briefly, when you're working in CAD, you've got all these colors, lines, everything. It's fairly, we try and make it fairly easy to read on the computer. But when all that stuff prints out, it's black and white at the end of the day. And maybe that'll change someday with tablets and things. But the way things work right now, we print them out. It's black and white. It has to be readable. And so one of the things I've always, to design even for me is how the drawings look. Sure. Are they clean? Are they readable? Does it look good? Do the drawings look good?
It's an art
form. Yeah, it is an art form.
Yep.
And it used to frustrate me early on when we first started using CAD. And yes, I'm old. I used to draft by hand, and I think it was more important when you drafted by hand. You had to have a certain. I'm not that old, but you had to have a certain quality to your to your lettering and just laying. You had to be very careful about how you laid out the drawings because you couldn't just pick up an entire floor plan and move it around.
Yeah.
So and so when we got to the computer, that made it a little bit easier. But what I found was, when students were just graduating, the students that learned CAD, from the start, they didn't necessarily draft by hand first, was that they didn't really pay attention to how the drawings are laid out. So I'm sorry, I'm going off on a rant here, but to kind of summarize, design is everything. It could be the way a detail looks, how it's labeled, the line thicknesses in a detail or a section cut.
It's where you put all those call-outs and stuff, how you line them up and get them out of the way so that the drawing is legible. Yeah,
exactly.
I
exactly. So even if you're not, designing that Freedom Tower right away, or even in your day-to-day work, there's design involved in everything we do, and that is just internal to me. Yep. Even maybe the way I lay out the furniture in my house, there's a design sense to it, and I think
what you're talking about, Neal, is the difference, and this is a great topic in just design. And what I call what you're talking about is design with a little d versus design with a big D, because you're right, everything needs to be designed, and that is what we take pride in is the details, right? It's getting down and designing every little thing, whereas design with a capital D, and my friend Mark, who's also my mentor, he has a thing where he states this so eloquently. Design with a capital D is fashion, and design with a little d is how it works, which is way more important than fashion.
Exactly. I preach to, the guys that work with me, work for me and everything else that, every line has a meaning, so you need to know and understand exactly why it is that you're drawing that particular line and what it represents, and you carry that little d design all the way through things like your specifications, through your design documents, because at the end of the day, if you have a question on what you've drawn, the contractor is going to have a question, and it's going to cost a lot more when the contractor asks that question than when you ask the question. So, it's that little d. How do you carry that all the way through? So tell Mark thank you, because that's a great way to explain it.
Well, and I think a lot of people coming out of school, for sure, at least the schools that I'm familiar with around me, are only concerned with the capital D designer. They want,
absolutely,
and that's they do want to work on those really meaningful big projects, and I think that there's definitely some humbleness that goes into working on K-12 projects. They don't have a ton of money, but you also have tons and tons of opportunities to solve problems through design that are just amazing experiences that you get to lead your clients through and say, it doesn't have to be that dumb way that you're used to. It can be made exactly how you need it so that it works better for you in the future. And those are the kinds of things I love to do every day.
Absolutely. And, I want to definitely save that for another topic, because I want to talk about design, both capital D and small d design on a budget, because people think that budgets are limiting, and it's just the opposite. You're absolutely right. They're an opportunity to be able to stretch your normal way of thinking. It's not just a kit of parts. It's something that you can really explore and have fun with. And so let's, I'd like to, shelve that for a later chat, but
let's capture that. Yeah, definitely. Good stuff.
Yeah,
Well, and I think that's, those are some of the things we want to touch on for future podcasts, most certainly. And I think that's part of what drove us to get together and do this podcast, is that these are topics that that we care about, and hopefully you do as well, our listener. But that we need to explore, and nobody's really talking about.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that both of you have touched on is that we definitely want to kind of get the word out about is how this is normal stuff for us, and we're normal guys who do this, and we've all connected because of, I guess, just the way and the things that we've posted on Twitter and online and stuff. And I think that, again, Bob's website is kind of an inspiration because he just tells it like it is from a normal perspective, and that's what we want to do here, and why it's important to us, what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that all of us that get into this profession, we do it because we love it, and that makes everything that we do in design, whether it's big D or little d design, that just makes. That's why I think that's why I kind of refer to it as a profession. It doesn't seem like a job. A job is probably pumping gas down at the corner gas station or something, or being or doing something else. And not to bash anybody's job, but to me, this is something that I just enjoy doing. I love creating, and I love creating for my clients. I think the funniest thing is when I do meet with a client, especially an individual homeowner whose budgets are fairly small and they really don't even have the money to be paying an architect, and sometimes I lose jobs because of that. And that could be something else we talk about at some point, but I try and be very honest with my clients, and when I talk to them, I ask them, how do I solve this problem? Oftentimes I get clients come to me and say, I don't like my kitchen. Well, okay, what don't you like about it? What doesn't work?
And why?
And then try and dive a little deeper into understanding what the problem and why. What is the problem and why is it a problem? And you know what? Maybe after a conversation, we find out that it's really not the kitchen that's the problem. It's the stove that doesn't work sometimes, or the orientation of it. And if we just I think that sometimes, at least when I'm dealing with an individual homeowner, is that I have to be careful about, or first find out what the problem is. And I think sometimes the client doesn't even know at first. Sure. They just think that because of the wall color or something that they hate this space. And I did actually. I went out and met a client at a house, and they wanted to move some walls around and change some things. And actually, spending an hour with them talking about rearranging their furniture, literally, solved their problem. And I talked myself out of a job, but I was like, you don't really need you don't need me. I mean, you did need me, and I solved your problem, and thanks for the free consultation. And, if you ever need me again, here's my card.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that to me is what's important about what we do is we solve problems for people. And, on a small scale like I'm talking about, or on a larger scale like you guys do. I mean, I think that's what we do.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about our job is the ability to be objective about the issues that come up, because, like you said, that people just kind of talk themselves out of whatever because it's just how it is. Well, what if you thought about it this way? And I think a good thing that one of the things that we can bring to the table is say, well, have you thought about it this way? Because we have so much experience working with so many different project types and client types that we're able to cross-pollinate all those things. And, for instance, I went to a client where I have a project under construction right now where it's an old 60s Home Savings of America bank building, and it's a 6-story tall kind of mid-rise, and there's sections down the north and south facade that are just travertine tile that are so brittle they're ready to fall off and kill somebody. And so their concept was, well, let's replace it with tile that looks like travertine, so it looks the same. And so, like you're talking about, Neal, you want to ask the right questions, and this is definitely a whole topic in itself. But you go in and say, well, number one, what's the problem? Number two, what are the 5 different ways we could solve this problem? And have you thought about it this way? Have you thought about what your building says about you as an organization? I mean, the bank didn't own the building anymore. Now it's a different agency. So how does this bank building, what does it say about them as a transportation company? And so I started to try to get them thinking in those terms, and we came up with a few different solutions, of which they chose one, and they couldn't be happier because it never crossed their mind to explore different scenarios like that. They were like, let's put like for like.
Exactly.
But now it's something completely different, and it is going to become part of their identity, of which they didn't have one because it is a quote-unquote bank building, right? And so now they're going to be seen in a completely different way, which is going to be way better for their company. And that's the kind of cool stuff that I like to take a client through that process. And when people get to see that, really, I don't have to own a Camry. I could own a, an Audi. Instead, for the same price, let's do it. I never thought I could do that. That's the coolest thing.
It's fantastic, and that's really what architecture and what architects really do. Whether it's design with a big D or little d, I mean, that's really what we do. And that's the exciting part. That's why I think we get into this profession. It's why we go through the rigors of school, and sometimes we do lose that perspective. But that's also the value that architects bring to a project. And I think that's a challenge for us as a profession to really communicate to the outside world, is that we're not these people up on our ivory towers, which we've referred to a few times, is that, we're real people, we do real jobs, and we add real value to a project. And, Evan, in your case, you've probably, brought more value than your fee than they ever paid you, because you've almost rebranded them and their building as a new identity. Yeah. And that's something that they probably never thought of when they hired an architect. It's similar to a project. I have a small remodel going on here locally here, and I think the client, when I went to them, they had some very basic needs, and then through the value that I brought to the project, now when you drive down this street, you can see this addition, and A, it doesn't look like an addition, and B, it's kind of interesting. It gets people talking. It's added value to their house that if they do decide to move it someday, people are going to look at that and go, wow, that house is nice. It's cool. Is there something different about it? I don't know what it is, but it looks nicer than the house next door, and there's a value there. Yeah. And so it's hard sometimes to get my clients, maybe more my clients than individual homeowners, to understand that, that it's more than just a set of drawings that I'm providing to them. I'm there to ask questions, to give them a design solution that they probably didn't think about, or certainly if they had talked to the contractor before, the contractor might have made 1 or 2 suggestions: move a wall, move the toilet here, or move the sink over to that side, because that's all he's thinking about. Where I come in and go, well, what if the room's over here? And it's like, whoa, wait a minute, nobody ever thought of that. And then you add value to the project that justifies your fee. Exactly.
Yep. Cool stuff. I get my blood pressure goes up when talk about stuff like this.
Oh yeah. I mean, we always, I always refer to, the design process as, it's an educational process. I mean, throughout. It's not just the education of us showing them here's the experience that we have, and here's what we can do with it, but it's also it's that cross pollination between how do they live? How do they work? How do they teach? Things like that. And how do we take our, understanding of the built environment and mold the two together to give them the best environment that they, that they want and they need. And sometimes, they come in, like with residential, with the dream home. It's stuck in their head. This is what my dream home is. I just can't really understand how to do it. So then it's the sit down, the dialogue, the educational process, both between the architect and the homeowner that, comes up with the best solution that, Neal was talking about. And, looking at the photos on your page, Neal, I mean, it looks fantastic. And you're right. It's kind of a seamless stitch from, the existing house to, what it's going to become. But, you've also given us a glimpse at the additional, like the surrounding area. And you're right. I mean, value-wise, it's it's a fantastic addition.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But that's, I guess, the point that, why we're here talking about this is that I think it's good to get it out there that, even on a smallest scale possible, a bathroom or a kitchen remodel, that there can be design, or even in, the things like we do with our business cards or anything else that we do. But I think those people like us that enjoy that aspect of things is why we get involved in this profession and why we go through the rigors of school. And if you're going through school now and listening to this, I mean, this is why you probably got into this. Yeah. And why you're and why it's going to be worth it. Let's put it that way. It will be worth it. And whether you make $1 million a year or $50,000 a year, sometimes it's not always about the money. And certainly when it comes to paying the bills, it is about the money. But as you go through your career, you'll make the money. It'll be there.
It's about the life, and it's about the kind of life you want to live.
And and how you want to affect other people. Like one thing that I read recently was there's this photographer that I follow a little bit online, and he has a mentor that he went to, and basically he had this epiphany where when his mentor said, the reason that you're so good at what you do is because you honor the talents that you've been given. And that really resonated with me, because the best part of my job is connecting with the client when they get it, because I was able to communicate what I'm good at doing. And that's when you see that spark in their eye, like, I never thought of it that way, or I didn't know we could do that, or, wow, thanks for giving me that perspective. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I love going through that process with them, because that is me honoring the talent that I've been given. Just connecting with them on that real personal level is so rewarding, and that's really what I love most about what we do.
Yeah, it's that the aha moment.
All right, well, if our audience has any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you guys, and you can follow us on Twitter at Archispeak, which is ARCHISPK, or you can check out our website, which is archispeakpodcast.com. That's ARCHISPEAK, the full word, archispeakpodcast.com. And on there is place for comments after each episode. And you can also find links to each episode there. So archispeakpodcast.com. You can also follow me on Twitter. I am at etroxel, ETROXEL, and I'd love to hear what you think about what we're doing here. What about you, Neal?
You can follow me at first initial N, last name Pan, PANN, at Twitter. And that's usually the best place to find me. And Cormac?
And you can find me on Twitter as well, and it's I've made it a little bit more difficult. It's at Archetype, and it's ARCHY_TYPE.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. And to you listeners out there who found us, you can go to iTunes and subscribe to the show, and you can also rate us there, and that would be really helpful to help kick this show off right. We'd love to hear what you have to say. We'll see you again in a couple weeks. Bye.